You remember December 2022? A big storm rolls through. It causes damage to West Cliff Drive in downtown Capitola. Even President Biden came by to survey the damage. Fast forward 2 years, December 2024, another storm rolls through. It causes major damage to the wharf. The science tells us that wave power is increasing. Energy in the ocean is increasing, and it's delivering that energy to our coastline. The good news is that we have Dr. Tiffany Wise-West on the case. She is the Sustainability and Resiliency Officer for the City of Santa Cruz, and we sit down on today's episode of Science Solutions Santa Cruz to discuss what do we know about the state of our coastline here, and what are some of the solutions on the table for us to protect it. I'm Jonathan Hicken. Enjoy. In the studio today, I have Dr. Tiffany Wise-West, Sustainability and Resiliency Officer at the City of Santa Cruz. Hello, Tiffany.
Hello, Jonathan.
It's nice to see you.
It's great to see you.
Last time I saw you, you were receiving a Lifetime Achievement Award at the Nexties Earth and Sea.
That is correct.
That was a heck of a night, right?
It was. It was a great evening, and it was so humbling.
This is an award show we did for the first time in October that we'll do again actually in October coming up, where we celebrated people like you and scientists in the community. And you have been such a powerhouse titan in this community for so long now. Now you got the Lifetime Achievement Award, but I know you're still doing your thing. So this is just like taking a moment to recognize you. So thank you for that.
Oh, for sure. Thank you. And I really appreciated it, especially amongst so many people here in Santa Cruz that, we work with. It just was an incredible honor.
I was just telling Cassidy, who's in the studio with us, that you're one of these people that I'm like, how does Tiffany do all of the things that she does? You're like one of these superheroes. You mentioned the 30-year shoreline adaptation and management plan, and that's what we're here mostly to talk about. So What is it? What is this plan that you're working on?
Sure. So the city has been working on coastal resilience, for all time, but really in earnest the past 8 years, 10 years or so, where we first started characterizing, okay, what can we expect in terms of coastal erosion, coastal flooding, sea level rise over time, spatially, starting to put in, what kind of strategies could we do? But what we really need to do is look out 30 years and figure out what are we going to do with our coastline. I'm sure that a lot of your listeners have noticed the city has been in somewhat of a reactionary mode, and especially evident over the past few years. And we've really been trying to turn this corner and get into a proactive mode. So some decisions that have, need to be made are going to be made through this process, through a really collaborative process that's been going on since last summer. And we will be developing specific infrastructure projects and policies for 3 sub-areas of Santa Cruz: West Cliff, Main Cow Beaches, and Seabright East Cliff. So it will all be wrapped up by March of next year. So we have a ways to go, but we're really in the thick of it right now in determining those projects and policies. And we're going to be bringing that to the public to weigh in on options this summer.
I want to get to sort of this intersection. You're at this really cool like policy and public opinion and science and engineering, and funding. I mean, you're kind of like figuring that puzzle out every day. And I want to get to that in a second. But can we start maybe with this, like, what is the fundamental promise or what is the fundamental objective of this 30-year plan and kind of who is it for?
Sure. So the objective is to plan for long-term erosion, coastal storm flooding, and sea level rise by developing specific projects, which will set us down, strategy pathways that could limit what we do in the future, as well as policies that'll get us to resilience. Who this is for is our community at large. We have frontline neighbors down in the beach flats. We have people on West Cliff that, are acutely impacted by this, but we also have a lot of folks that recreate at the coast. We have visitors that come from out of the city, out of the county, out of the state for tourism, which is another important piece. So this is for everyone. Getting down to really specific objectives, in addition to determining those projects, those policies, we also are striving to demonstrate compliance with Senate Bill 272, which requires that coastal jurisdictions do sea level rise planning that meets specific minimum criteria. And fortunately, we've already completed that facet or that objective of the project.
What are some examples of that?
It's a whole litany of things, needing to do a vulnerability assessment that uses best available science, demonstrating solid engagement, including with tribal entities and frontline community members, addressing everything from transportation to archaeological resources to recreation to tourism. So demonstrating that we've done all that work, cost benefit analyses. There are literally a dozen different criteria. And that was another project we actually did last year with Anne's class, the Coastal Science and Policy classes. They did our initial gap analysis, looking at our entire body of work and assessing against the criteria, where do we fall? And fortunately, we had met almost all the criteria. We had a few little gaps we needed to fill. We did that in the fall through this project. We've been consulting with the Ocean Protection Council, the Coastal Commission, who make that determination that we meet SB 272, and we're in really good shape there.
And what's the implication of that? If we're in really good shape, so is that like green light to, to begin the work, or what does that mean?
Yeah, it means we have buy-in from the Coastal Commission, which is very important for us, right? And it also puts us in a really great position for funding, for state funding. So a couple of different things that come with that SB 272. And we are, I have to say, one of the early cities to be able to demonstrate compliance. So it's good. We actually have until 2034 to do it, but we've already done it.
Whoa, 8 years ahead of pace.
Yeah, I mean, we already had done a lot of the work. So, we wanted to demonstrate it. There were just a couple little gaps to fill, and we wanted to do that as part of this project. So that's great.
That's incredible. And that's a testament to your and your office's work over the last decade or so, right? If you've been doing the work that the state eventually realized, like, oh, this is work we need to do, and you've already been doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. And with our partners, we work with a lot of different partners, whether it's nonprofits, state, federal agencies. I mean, that is, I think, one of the city's superpowers is that we leverage all kinds of resources and partnerships to make this stuff happen, because it cannot just happen with one person, right? And we have a big brain trust here in Santa Cruz and in California to make it happen. And I get the really lucky role to be able to be the person to say, okay, yeah, that's something we could leverage. We could go for that. We can use that to get this done. That's exciting.
I was thinking about this conversation last night, and I was actually ended up reflecting on just like democracy as a whole, and is it really the city government's responsibility to do all this stuff, or is it the responsibility of the government to find the people in the community who can do this? And it sounds like that's a large part of your approach, is like, hey, we're all in this together.
Absolutely. And my job, our job at the city, is really to engage all of these folks, bring in all of this information and data, synthesize it, understand all the nuances, put it out back into the community in an understandable kind of way, get that feedback, and then make recommendations to our decision makers, who ultimately are the deciders on what happens. And I think it's really important that we're hearing all the perspectives. We're being very transparent and inclusive, transparent about what we know, maybe what we don't know, and where there's uncertainty, and characterizing that uncertainty. That's all really important, because, as you know, this is a super complex topic. And that is, I think, one of the big challenges is breaking it down into a simple way that people can understand and engage productively and provide valuable input without losing that nuance, particularly around the regulatory context, which I think is often underappreciated, or the anatomy of a project, that you don't just immediately have $10 million to do something. You have to build to that. And then you have, environmental review and design and so forth. And you have to find funding every step of the way. And I know sometimes all of that is very unsatisfying for people to hear, but that's part of this process. It can be messy for sure.
So where are we today? It's April 2nd as we record this. Where are we in the planning process right now?
Yeah. So we have kind of synthesized all of the information that we've done to date in terms of studies, best available science from other places like USGS and so forth, put together our existing and future conditions. What's the condition of every single riprap structure, where riprap are those big boulders that protect our coast. Westcliff is 50% riprap. So getting down to the really minute of like, okay, what's the condition of all of this stuff? What can we expect in terms of erosion? What can we expect in terms of our beaches narrowing? So we really understand what we're trying to solve for. So we've got all that completed. So that's where we're at in the process. We're preparing all of this also right now for this summer engagement, where we'll be doing tabletop exercises in these workshops with focus groups of, different kind of interested parties, whether it's recreation, surfing, differently abled people who use the beach, our Beach Flats frontline Spanish speakers. We'll be doing all of that, that tabletop exercise with these groups so that we understand what their priorities are as well. So then when we bring recommendations to council in the fall, we'll have all the information to share with them, be able to report who wants what. Here's what we think is, the best compromise, because it is going to be a compromise for these different areas. They might want us to look at more after that, but that's where things are going.
I felt so much pride in like being a Santa Cruz resident, saying that we were selected for this this special group, this accelerator. Is kind of like, yeah, we're on the cutting edge. And actually that's a theme in a lot of the conversations I'm having with guests on this show, is just some of the really incredible forward thinking work that's happening here. I know you're a big part of that. You said sort of we have just completed this present and future conditions assessment. What are some of the things that we learned through the science and through some of our scientific partners? Like where do things stand today?
Sure. So, there's really no big surprises here, right? We're expecting accelerated coastal erosion, both from wave energy increasing due to the increasing warming of the ocean, as well as sea level rise. In addition to stormwater, a lot of people don't realize that stormwater that's coming from inland flowing over the bluffs also exacerbates erosion. So it's coming from both directions. We have some what we call kind of emergent hazards that are newly understood around emerging groundwater, for example, that we have high groundwater tables in Santa Cruz. Sea level rise is increasing the pressure on those groundwater tables, so that will increase the propensity for flooding.
So you're describing there's water beneath the surface, the land. And that water is relatively close to the surface, is I think what I'm hearing you say.
That's right.
And the ocean, as it rises and as there's more energy there, it's actually pushing that water up.
Correct.
Am I understanding that correctly?
That's
okay.
right. That's right.
And what are the implications of that?
Increased potential for flooding, for inland flooding. We did do a study that we've brought into this work as well, looking at riverine flooding, meaning, okay, we know also from climate change, we're going to be seeing more intense precipitation that's coming down through our watershed. That means our river contributes to flooding in addition to flooding coming from the ocean, right? And we've done a study of what's the nexus of where those intersect, which also is helping us to understand the emergent groundwater piece. It all kind of interplays together. That's what we're seeing is the erosion, and some of the things that have come out, for example, through the Save the Waves Surfonomics study is that, our recreation, our surfing is threatened with sea level rise. We worked with Dan Reineman out of CSU Channel Islands. He's the surf professor. And Save the Waves study confirmed this, is that, we could see some of our surf breaks being drowned out as early as 2060. With that said, perhaps others will emerge, but obviously surfing is a huge part of our culture here in Santa Cruz, a huge part of our economy. So, these different hazards are going to impact different things. They're going to also impact shifts in habitat, connectivity, all of those things that we need to be thinking about, in addition to, of course, safety and, the really present things, the infrastructure, performance, those kinds of things. So lots of impacts from these hazards. So we have a good understanding of all of that.
Okay. So there's erosion, you said, from the waves and the increased ocean energy and stormwater. There's the water table, the groundwater table that's rising.
Yep.
Was there anything unexpected from the evaluation of the current conditions?
Not necessarily. Okay. I think for me, some new information was related to our beaches. Through our recent nature-based solutions feasibility study, which I know you participated in on our advisory. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
As well. We learned that with 3 feet of sea level rise, we're going to lose 100 feet of Main Beach if we continue to hold the line there with our short seawall and the wall of the boardwalk. We also have learned that our pocket beaches on West Cliff have really deep shelves. And so their ability to accrete or build sand on them is maybe not as high as we once thought. So perhaps things like doing beach nourishment, which is placing sand, a difficult endeavor, but we could do pilots, or catching sand. Maybe we can't really hold that sand there, So those were some new things for me to learn. There's still more to learn about, for example, the bathymetry or the topography of our offshore environment. Also, there are question marks on regulatory in the future. What's going to happen there? So, we don't have everything answered, but we have a good sense of physically, from a geophysical perspective, what will happen, rates of erosion, where our hotspots are for episodic erosion, where flooding will happen, that kind of thing.
All right, quick point of clarification. When you said 100, we have stand to lose up to 100 feet of Main Beach. Is that under 100 feet from the shore to the boardwalk wall?
Correct.
Okay. Wow, that's a lot.
Yeah, with 3 feet of sea level rise, which could come as soon as 2060, could be end of the century.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a very difficult thing to say, which is why we use triggers and thresholds, right? We have this whole, don't want to get too in the weeds on this, but we use this adaptation pathways approach, which is another thing that we're formalizing through this Shoreline Adaptation and Management Plan project, is that because of the uncertainty on when these things will happen, using actual observed triggers makes a lot of sense, right? Because then you're not making an investment too late, right? So like if you see, for example, we have a tidal gauge at the wharf, part of our coastal change monitoring network that's being incrementally deployed. When you see that the elevation is increasing towards 3 feet, that's like a signal you better start doing something, or you're not going to have beach to accommodate the density of recreation that happens there now, which has a lot of implications for the city. It means it's less desirable to come here and use the beach, which is the most popular beach in our county, is Main Beach. That means less tourist dollars. That means less tax dollars for all of our infrastructure. So I'm hoping that through this funding and financing study, we're going to be able to really dig into a lot of that. Like, here's the dollars and cents of why dealing with this makes sense. And let's figure out the right trigger on when we're going to start that. Because we can't wait till when 3 feet happens, right? It's too late then. But what is the right time? 2 feet?
I recall one of these steering group meetings, you showing sort of some of these triggers, and this was shortly after the 2023 storms, I believe. And it was like we had eclipsed like 4 out of the 6 triggers or something like that. And it like happened overnight essentially. And you're like, okay, the triggers are met. It's time to get to work.
Right.
So that's what you mean, right? By trigger.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And that was, I'm glad you brought that up, because I like to use that example to show, we might think something's going to happen in the short, medium, or long term, but really it could happen at any time. And so if we can put these signals in place that make sense, which is not an easy thing to do. It's not like a hard and fast science. Again, it's something we're on the leading edge of. Not a lot of great examples throughout the state, even though the state wants us to use this type of approach, but it is the smart approach. And we even hear that from like the realtors have said, we think that's a smart approach, instead of just, going gangbusters, like we got to move back now. Let's wait until we actually really have to move back when it makes sense. And let's all determine what that trigger is together. And if we can agree on that, then, we have buy-in on our strategy.
If you haven't visited the Seymour Marine Discovery Center at UC Santa Cruz in a while, or ever, you really should come visit us. We are right on the bluffs of the beautiful Monterey Bay, with an aquarium full of local species and a bunch of hands-on science exhibits that help you understand what's happening in our ocean and along our coast. We are connecting the incredible research happening at UC Santa Cruz with real-world solutions for our coastal community. We don't want science to just sit on a shelf. We want it to shape decisions, inspire kids, and help our community feel equipped to act. So if you care about the future of our ocean and our coastal community, or you just want to experience a place that makes you feel a little more connected to it, come visit us at the Seymour Marine Discovery Center. Science Solutions, Santa Cruz. And you're moving now in this project towards this, like, the projects, kind of defining the projects and the cost of the project. What are some of the solutions might be? What are some of the things that are emerging as possible projects? I know you haven't committed to anything yet, but what are some of the things that the group is considering? Yeah,
we just are developing these now, so I will kind of caveat what I'm saying is this is just some early kind of work.
Understood.
Let's take Westcliff Drive. I mean, there's, a lot we can look at here, but I think Westcliff Drive is a good example. I think our community knows we just put in 3 seawalls. We just repaired Bethany Curve. That is an armoring approach that's going to last 50 years, right? And around that, we have the boulders, all the riprap in various states of repair and disrepair. And we have a couple of choices there, right? We could go ahead and armor everything there, which comes with its own consequences, more erosion on adjacent unarmored areas, perhaps habitat implications. Also, when you put in armoring, you have to do something called mitigation, which the Coastal Commission requires, which means basically lessening the harm that happens with that armoring, which means you have to do maybe some access improvements, habitat improvements, maybe move back somewhere else.
What are some of the harms, so to speak, of armoring, or what are some of the risks?
Sure. So first of all, it takes up beach space if you happen to be doing in front of a beach, which, takes away from recreation. Number 2, it can squelch intertidal habitat that it's sitting on, or even bluff top habitat. It also causes more erosion on adjacent unarmored bluffs.
How does that work?
It's scouring basically. And it's just the dynamics of what happens, around these seawalls.
So I imagine it has something to do with the energy coming in and getting dissipated and shot off in these different directions. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now, that's one option for there, knowing that we would have to do mitigation somewhere else, but also knowing we're committed to 50 years with these ones that are already put in.
Yeah, we're in it for the long haul with
right?
These, yeah.
Already. So does it make sense to do the other option, which is let it erode and accommodate traffic patterns, parking lots perhaps, maybe move some parking lots or take away parking lots. So, those are a couple options that potentially are on the table. I do not know how this will pan out, right? But those are a couple things to think about. I mentioned on the beaches, can we bring in sand and nourish when the time is right? Again, comes with its own trade-offs. Might squelch habitat that's on the beach. Very difficult to find sand that might be suitable, very expensive, and has to be done repeatedly. But, down on Main Cow Beach, we have development right up to the beach, right? So moving back, it's going to be a long-term thing, right? I mean, as Gary Griggs says, you cannot hold back the ocean forever. So we might be able to do some armoring in the medium term, the 30 to 50 year time frame, but eventually, we are going to have to move back, very likely. And that's not what we're deciding through this project in the long term. We're really figuring out what's the medium term, the next 30 years. But the choices that are made now will impact what's possible in the future, most definitely. So, more riprap repairs. In the meantime, like if we are thinking in the future that we need to move back, let's address traffic conditions that might happen inland. Let's build out our sidewalks. Let's build out our curbs and our crosswalks and figure out ingress and egress. So entrance and exit, 2 different areas. Like, let's not just go straight to something that could have some serious implications for our residents. Let's make sure we address those things. So lots of things like that are coming up. We've really just started with West Cliff, and we're moving into Main Cow and then over to Seabright East Cliff. So those are some things,
Sure.
And there may be others. I mean, again, we have just started this over the last month, kind of using the work we've done previously. We had a really good start on this in terms of projects that we could do or strategies that we could do, but now we're really getting into the nitty gritty. Like, okay, we're going to repair riprap numbers 24, 26, 27. That's going to last for 30 years. It's going to cost this much. We're going to,
Oh, it's that level of detail.
we're getting to that level of detail.
Wow.
Really
Wow.
specific.
You have numbers for each of the
We
riprap boulders?
do. We do. Not for the boulders,
Okay,
but each
okay, okay,
structure.
okay,
Each
all right.
structure, which is a set of boulders.
I was imagining these boulders having
Yeah.
names like that's Jimmy and that's
Yeah, no. That was something we did in some of our earlier work is we essentially created an inventory of all of our coastal assets, whether that's seawalls, riprap, stairwells. I even consider the beaches an asset, right? Like we have to treat them as an asset like we do any other pipeline, roadway. It requires care and maintenance and planning. So we have all of that in an organized kind of way that we will be maintaining, as, for example, these seawalls went in for the emergency repairs. Those replaced riprap, right? So now our inventory is updated, has the most current condition, the most current asset in that location.
A term that I think has become more popular in the last couple of years is nature-based solutions.
Yes.
So what is a nature-based solution and how does that apply to this 30-year plan?
Yes, perfect segue. I'm glad you mentioned that. So nature-based solutions are working with natural elements, natural processes to provide protection for the coast or preservation of the coast. Santa Cruz has such a high energy dynamic coastline, and we don't have a lot of space to construct wetlands and things like that our sweet spot is the combination of hard and soft or gray and green solutions. So some of the projects that I mentioned, like riprap repair, this came out of recommendations from our nature-based solutions study, is that, okay, if we have to do riprap repair, how about we bring in some natural elements like some tide pool blocks at the base of the riprap so that we can, foster the intertidal environment? How about maybe some bird perches, maybe some step pools at the top that can handle that stormwater that's coming over the edge, but also provide some habitat for birds, right? So then you're getting those co-benefits for the habitat, for aesthetics, and you're still getting the protective element. So that's one example of kind of a gray-green solution. We also are looking at, down at Main Cow beaches, the possibility of vegetated dunes, which leans towards that greener side. Those can be underlain by things like cobbles or woody debris structures that give them kind of some structural integrity, but then overlaid by sand and vegetation. So there's some opportunities for that. And in fact, all of our low-lying beach areas were vegetated dunes prior to urbanization and development on the coastline. So really looking at, okay, if and when we do need to move back, what can we do to foster that kind of original feature that was characteristic of our coastline?
So Santa Cruz, and this kind of makes sense to me because it's a rocky bluffs, and so there's limitations there as opposed to, say, in South County or Monterey County, where they have that low-lying sort of marshlands and the sloughs and stuff.
Exactly.
Like that's the sort of geological difference that is controlling what approaches we can take.
Absolutely.
And then when you talked about vegetated dunes, I'm thinking of Seabright on the path down to the lighthouse.
Totally.
Yeah. There's
totally.
those little protected dunes with plants growing out of them.
Exactly. That's actually a very successful example of coastal restoration using vegetated dunes. And got to give a big shout out to Bill Henry with Groundswell Coastal Ecology. He would be great to come on here.
Okay, all
he
right,
would
noted.
be really great.
Okay.
He's heading up the Monterey Bay Living Shoreline Project. So anyway, that would be good. But at any rate, his group, Groundswell Coastal Ecology, they're the ones that restored that, and it's been very successful. And what that does is that helps to build sand, that helps to build out the beach. And one thing that we found through our studies is that, the West Jetty there, because of the way that the sand transports down the coast, down coast essentially, that jetty used to catch sand. So Seabright Beach used to be 2/3 less in width than it was before, than it is now before that jetty was built.
Width meaning shoreline to
the water edge.
Okay.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Wow. 2/3?
Right. Yes.
Holy moly.
However, that has come to an equilibrium, and that dynamic actually was helping Main Beach to build up as well. But that dynamic has come to an equilibrium. So with sea level rise, that means we're going to be losing the beaches. So accreting sand or building sand through these dunes is really important.
Sure, it's a counterbalance.
Exactly. And Seabright has the width to really do that in a big way. That's been very successful. They've engaged community members who help to maintain it. Kids propagate the plants in schools. So it's just been really marvelous. That I'm glad you brought that up too.
And the sand dynamic, real quick. This is something I've heard. I mean, I only moved to Santa Cruz in 2013. And so, I'm learning the history here, but my understanding is that the sand kind of migrates down the coast, kind of, I guess it would be west to east.
Right.
And when we built that jetty, it kind of
catches it,
right?
Exactly.
Okay, and that's why Seabright has grown.
And Main Beach to
and
some
Main
extent.
Beach. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, both of those things.
Yeah. But it also remains to be seen if we could really do something like the jetty nowadays, because we have a sanctuary, which brings us to another project option that could happen in the future, probably not likely now, and that's, artificial reefs, which again is kind of falls in between that gray-green spectrum, because it is an engineered structure. And right now, artificial reefs can only be put in place for the primary purpose of restoration of, say, for example, kelp beds or other, other kind of habitat or marine vegetation. But it can have the co-benefit of knocking down wave energy, which thus could, reduce erosion on the coastline. So that's something we started to take a look at through our nature-based solutions project off of the wharf, and found that a 300-foot artificial reef under different levels of submergence, meaning, different depths below the water surface, could potentially knock down wave energy between 50 and 90%. And that's substantial, right? After especially seeing what happened last year on the wharf.
Oh, yeah.
But we didn't look at, we looked at technical feasibility. We didn't look at navigation impacts, fishing impacts, surfing impacts. Could we even permit something like that? And right now, California is going through rulemaking on permitting artificial reefs. That won't be done till 2027. So it's not really clear right now. We probably can't move forward with something like that in the near term, but it's on the table for the longer term. Maybe it's something in the medium term that we start, working towards. Our consultants on that project told us, they're like, okay, you've done modeling exercise number 1. You probably have a minimum of 3 more before you would even be able to get to a go, no go on this. So we have a ways to go. And there might be other areas where artificial reefs, even intertidal reefs, where you're reconnecting sea stacks that, might have been a bridge, like natural bridges in the past that collapsed. And can you reconnect those, and those could catch sand, for our pocket beaches? Is that possible, right? Right now, maybe not. Coastal Commission was not excited about that option when we did our nature-based solutions study, but, we're trying to keep our options open for the future in case things would change.
What's clear to me in that is that you're thinking big. I mean, you're looking at these big solutions, and they may not all be feasible, but I'm personally, as a resident of Santa Cruz, I'm glad you're thinking big like that. And just to be clear, when you talk about an artificial reef, we're talking about like sinking big cement structures, I'm assuming, or rock structures deliberately,
Yes.
Along the coast. That's what an artificial reef is, right?
And it can be made of all kinds of different material, but basically what you said is correct. And then with the thought that that's going to give substrate for, say, kelp to latch onto and grow, right? Or whatever, kelp happens to be. We have a super healthy kelp forest off Santa Cruz, which is really, it's rare in California, actually. So the only place we don't have kelp is actually in front of the wharf, which is why we looked at the artificial reef there, because your primary purpose needs to be for restoration. And so
so you can almost like shoehorn this in because maybe we want to grow the kelp, but also we can reduce wave power.
Potentially.
Interesting.
I mean, we got a lot more to look at with that. So I don't want to predestine anything, but we will, however, kelp will be impacted by climate change, by sea level rise over time. So, we could see a reduction in the acreage of kelp, but right now we have really healthy kelp. So again, that's not, that doesn't lend for a great proposal for an artificial reef in other areas because we already have healthy kelp. And, one other really cool thing, I want to give a shout out to another one of the Event Santa Cruz Next Award winners, which is Hazel Campbell, who
high school student at Pacific Collegiate School.
Exactly. Her study looking at the efficacy or the effectiveness of kelp in knocking down wave energy before it gets to the coastline was actually pretty novel. She corrected an error or not an error, but kind of a sort of a flaw in prior studies regarding friction, the use of friction in the study. And we actually cited her in our study because her study demonstrates that kelp has a little bit more potential than was previously known to actually knock down wave energy. It's pretty minimal, but still really outstanding work.
Yeah, no way.
For a high school student.
That's wild. Shout out Hazel. That's incredible.
She's amazing.
Yeah.
She's so great. Yeah.
So when as we go through this process, first of all, how long is this 30-year planning phase going to take, more or less?
We're targeting being done by March of next year. So we have about another year. We've been in this since about last summer, but it's moving very quickly now. A year is not a lot of time to get this done. There's a lot of public process to happen. We also are going to be doing public opinion polling. So once we get through development of the projects, the recommendations, the public engagement, we want to go and do public opinion polling to verify that what we're recommending that has come out of all of this work does reflect our community's desires, right? And, within the context of the regulatory and all of that kind of thing, because, we want to make sure our council is confident in what they're getting from us and that the decisions that they're making are really grounded in community viewpoints as well as the science, the regulatory, and everything else. So public opinion polling will be coming in the fall timeframe. But yeah, it will be all wound up by March. And then it's just continuing to find money as we're trying to do right now. I mean, with the Westcliff work, we did a Westcliff 5-year roadmap that was adopted last year that has 5 projects, including some of this riprap repair. So we're already working on those 5 projects, trying to find the funding for those projects. So we're kind of doing all that in parallel, moving back, we're moving back the road in that one bite.
Just past the lighthouse,
Just
right?
past the lighthouse, across from Lighthouse Field on kind of the western boundary of Lighthouse Field. So Westcliff Drive is going to be moving back into Lighthouse Field to accommodate that. That actually is a partial mitigation. If you remember earlier, we talked about mitigation. That's a partial mitigation for those info walls that we had to put in.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
So the erosion we're seeing right there is in part due to those walls?
No, that's not what I mean.
Oh.
What I mean is that by moving the road back and not armoring that area, that moving back serves as a partial mitigation for the infill walls that went in.
Got it.
So in addition to some other access improvements, we're also going to be retrieving some fugitive riprap that has gone kind of astray over the beaches. That's
picked up and carried down the beach.
Yeah,
okay.
we're going to pick up some of that to, make sure that it's not just sitting on the beach taking up space, and that it's actually being used for, the protective purpose it originally was there for. So we have a lot of other stuff happening while this planning project's happening in terms of infrastructure. And, if folks want to know more about this, you can go to do a little search for Resilient Coast Santa Cruz, and we have all of our stuff online. We have some really good graphics, and really just try to keep everybody informed to the best extent we can, making sure folks are signed up for our city manager's weekly newsletter, because that is the best way to get information, as well as our social media, because we want people to know what's going on, because I know people do get frustrated and they may not see it, especially when, we're looking for money or we're doing the design piece. It's not something that's like, bulldozers out there actually moving dirt, but it is happening, and it's exciting.
Well, we'll link to all that stuff in the show notes here so listeners can go find it and catch up. And as this project unfolds, we'll also help get the word out and make sure everybody knows where they can get involved. We appreciate that. Before we wrap up, we've been talking about this process and, your leadership in this process, but right at the beginning of the conversation, I noted that you're at this cool intersection of funding and you have a PhD in civil engineering, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, PhD in environmental studies, bachelor's in civil engineering.
Okay, excuse me.
Yeah.
So you've got the science side, you've got the engineering side, you're doing funding, public opinion and polling and state policy. You're trying to put this little puzzle together that takes so many different criteria. For you, what is the magic or what is the frustration in putting that puzzle together?
The magic is seeing it come together.
Yeah.
We've come a long way in 8 years. Really also, I'm really proud of our engagement with our frontline community members, with our tribal folks. We weren't doing that 10 years ago, right? All of that's really exciting. I think the hardest part is making people realize that we are going to have to compromise, right? And that's hard. Trying to communicate really complex stuff, really nuanced stuff that's taken teams of people years to really have an understanding of, trying to break that down for folks so that they can productively participate and provide their input. It's so important, because if you don't understand that context, you're giving feedback in a bubble. And we don't want that. We want people to be informed in how they provide input. So, the education piece is super important, and making it very simple. That's another thing that we've heard from our community is like, as you said, I come from an engineering science background. So we're generating these 200, 400 page reports that are really technical, but our community doesn't receive that well, right? They want, just tell me what the highlights are in a easy to read format. Don't put out this other stuff. So we've really taken that to heart and really have shifted this, how we are approaching the communications and the education piece. And luckily we have such great advisors like you and other people that, help people like me who, I don't come from a communications background. I'm getting it, but
you're pretty damn good, if I do say so myself.
I don't know. I try, but other experts to help us where maybe we have gaps or where we need this help. It's just so important. Or to help us to get the word out, all of these nonprofits that we're working with, whether it's Black Surf Santa Cruz or it's Ventures or Community Action Board, all of whom are serving on our project advisory that are helping us to reach people in our community. It's so important that we have all these people at the table, that we're bringing folks along so that they understand what's happening out there, what the context is, what the nuances are, and let's make decisions together, or let's at least make recommendations together that our council can make decisions on.
And I'm certain that this is a community of people who care, that are invested, and sometimes that comes out in big feelings and big opinions. But at the fundamental core of it, what I've seen here at the Seymour Center, as we have, as we put more things out in our exhibit hall about these kinds of conversations, is that this is a community of people who care.
Absolutely.
And they want to be involved. They want their voice heard. And sometimes it's just a question of where to begin, kind of where to start.
Yeah.
And so all of these efforts that you're taking to kind of get the message out is, a really important component to making these smart decisions. So kudos and well done.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, you're so right on that. Our community it's really interesting because when I talk to, other cities throughout the state, because the peer exchange is really important with other cities. But, I'll talk about how many people we had at meetings or how many people at council. And they're like, oh my gosh, we wish we had one person and you guys have, and that's democracy in action. To your point, you mentioned democracy earlier. As hard and messy as it can get, that's democracy, right? Which is what we want.
That's what we're fighting for,
That's
right?
what we're fighting for, right?
Yeah.
So it's a good thing, and I'm grateful we have a community like this that cares and, willing to pitch in and help in all kinds of ways.
One last question for you, and then if there's anything else you want to plug before we wrap up. But my question to you is, when have you personally felt most proud of your work in the city?
That's an interesting question. I think it's actually right now, to be honest, just because we've come such a long way. We've been through these disasters and we're building momentum and we're doing the kind of work that we need to be doing. When I started this work 8 years ago, it was just me. And it was really hard to get the attention internally, externally. And as I said, that it was the silver lining of these disasters. And I'm really also grateful for the leadership that we have that allows us to be on the leading edge, because there is some risk involved in that. But it also has brought us so much opportunity and so many resources. And I'm just proud of our city as a whole for that, for the leadership, for the community members, for the momentum that we're building. I have to say, at one point I was feeling a little jaded a few years ago and frustrated, and I don't feel that anymore. I feel a sense of optimism that we can address this challenge and we can be a model for other cities and other jurisdictions. And I'm proud to play that role, to be that person that's able to communicate what we as a huge team here at Santa Cruz and a community are doing. It's very fulfilling. It's honestly, for me, I'm 30 years into my career. It's a career highlight. It is the career highlight. It's the most challenging piece because I've worked in all kinds of municipal infrastructure, emissions work. This has been the coastal resilience has been the most challenging, but also the most rewarding.
Well, I am personally so grateful for what you do. I mean, you carry so much for this community, for something that we all care about so deeply. And you are grinding day in and day out to do this hard work. So I'm super grateful. I'm a big fan.
Thank you.
So thanks for coming on and helping us understand what this is all about.
Sure. And if I can say one more thing, I want to give big kudos to the rest of our city team, because it's not just me. I might be out talking about it, but our engineers, our communications people, our planners, we've been able to build our little climate team to have project managers and planners, coastal resilience planners. Like, that is what's making it happen internally. And like I said, our leadership as well, our assistant city manager, our city manager, our mayor, and our council. So I want to really give credit where credit is due, because I'm just someone that, is out talking about it. But I encourage folks to sign up for the city manager's newsletter, go to our website. You can provide comments on any time on anything related to coastal. We'll get it. We'll respond to it. We try to be responsive. And yeah, if anyone wants to chat, they can, give me an email and give me a shout out, and always willing to talk to people and hear what they think and get them engaged in our processes.
Absolutely. That's fantastic. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you, Tiffany, for being here today.
Thank you, Jonathan.
All right, that does it for Science Solutions Santa Cruz. Thank you so much to Tiffany for joining me today. Thank you to everybody at the City of Santa Cruz for your important work on these solutions. Thanks to everybody on the Management and Adaptation Plan Steering Committee. Thanks to everybody in the community who has shared their voice and their opinion. I hope you continue to do that throughout this democratic process. Thanks to Edith Belmont for editing. Thanks to Cassidy Beach for production. See you next time.